The United States Constitution is often described as a living document, flexible enough to evolve, yet deliberately difficult to change. Since its ratification in 1788, thousands of amendments have been proposed, but only 27 have been successfully adopted. The amendment process, outlined in Article 5, requires approval by two-thirds of both houses of Congress and ratification by three-fourths of the states, a deliberately high threshold meant to ensure stability and broad consensus. As a result, many proposed amendments have failed. Among these, a small but significant group stands out: amendments that were actually approved by Congress and sent to the states, yet never achieved ratification. These unratified amendments reveal much about the political tensions, social movements, and unresolved debates all throughout American history. Hello, everyone. Giant Stonehead here. If you enjoy obscure science and forgotten history, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And stay till the end for the dad joke of the week. And now, let's talk about the Constitution. The difficulty of amending the Constitution cannot be overstated. Of the more than 11,000 amendments introduced in Congress over time, only 37 have cleared Congress and been submitted to the states. Of those, just 27 were ratified. 6 major amendments fall into the category of being approved by Congress but never ratified. These include proposals addressing congressional representation, aristocratic influence, slavery, child labor, gender equality, and voting rights in Washington, D.C. Some of these amendments are still technically pending, while others have expired after failing to meet ratification deadlines. The Congressional Apportionment Amendment, 1789. One of the earliest proposed amendments, submitted alongside the Bill of Rights, was the Congressional Apportionment Amendment. It sought to establish a precise formula for determining the size of the House of Representatives based on population. Initially, the amendment would have required one representative for every 30,000 people, with adjustment as population grew. It came remarkably close to ratification, falling just one state short in the early 1790s. Unlike many later amendments, this proposal had no ratification deadline, meaning it is technically still pending today. If adopted now, it could dramatically expand the House of Representatives to approximately, if I did my math correctly, 11,333, obviously by far beyond the current fixed size of 435 representatives. This amendment highlights early concerns about representation and a fear that a small legislature might become disconnected from the people. The Titles of Nobility Amendment, 1810. Proposed during a period of anxiety about foreign influence, particularly leading up to the War of 1812, the Titles of Nobility Amendment aimed to prevent America's citizens from being corrupted by foreign powers. The amendment would have stripped citizenship from any American who accepted a title of nobility or honor from a foreign government without congressional approval. At the time, the young republic was very wary of aristocratic traditions and external influence. Although the Constitution already prohibited the federal government from granting titles of nobility, this amendment sought to go further by targeting private citizens. The amendment came close to ratification, gaining approval from multiple states, but it ultimately fell short. Like the Apportionment Amendment, it remains technically pending because no deadline was imposed. The Corwin Amendment of 1861. Perhaps the most controversial unratified amendment is the Corwin Amendment, proposed on the eve of the Civil War. Its purpose was to protect slavery by preventing any future constitutional amendment from interfering with what it termed the domestic institutions of the states. In a last-ditch effort to avert secession, Congress passed the amendment and sent it to the states. A few states ratified it, but the outbreak of the Civil War soon rendered it irrelevant. The subsequent adoption of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, made the Corwin Amendment effectively obsolete. Still, because it lacked ratification deadline, it technically remains pending, an enduring reminder of the nation's deep divisions over slavery. Child Labor Amendment of 1924. In the early 20th century, concerns about the industrial exploitation of children led to calls for federal regulation of child labor. In response, Congress proposed the Child Labor Amendment of 1924. The amendment would have granted Congress explicit authority to regulate and prohibit child labor across the United States. While some states ratified the amendment, it never achieved the required three-fourths majority. Over time, however, the issue was largely addressed through federal legislation and Supreme Court decisions that upheld Congress's regulatory authority. As a result, the amendment lost much of its urgency, although technically it remains open for ratification due to the absence of a deadline. The Equal Rights Amendment of 1972. One of the most well-known unratified amendments is the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, which sought to guarantee equal rights regardless of sex. Passed by Congress in 1972, the ERA initially enjoyed strong support and was ratified by 35 states, just 3 short of the required 38. However, the amendment faced growing opposition and, despite a deadline extension, ultimately failed to be ratified in time. In recent years, additional states have ratified the ERA after the deadline, sparking legal and political debates about whether it could still become parts of the Constitution. The ERA remains a powerful symbol of the ongoing struggle for gender equality in the United States. The District of Columbia Voting Rights Amendment of 1978. Another modern amendment that failed ratification is the District of Columbia Voting Rights Amendment. This proposal aimed to grant Washington, D.C. full representation in Congress, treating it as if it were a state for the purposes of voting rights. It would have repealed the 23rd Amendment, which grants the district limited participation in presidential elections. Despite congressional approval, the amendment failed to gain sufficient support among the states before the 1985 deadline expired. Only a fraction of the required states ratified it. The issue of D.C. representation remains unresolved today and continues to be a subject of political debate. Beyond the 6 major unratified amendments, American history is filled with proposals that never made it out of Congress. These include some striking and unconventional ideas. For example, proposals have been introduced to abolish the presidency and replace it with a multi-person executive council or to select a president by lottery. Other proposals sought to change the country's name, eliminate the vice presidency, or allow unlimited presidential terms. While these ideas may seem unusual, they reflect ongoing debates about the structure and function of the American government. The failure of these amendments can be attributed to several factors. High ratification threshold. The requirements of 3/4 of states to approve an amendment ensures that only proposals with broad national support can succeed. Changing political context. Some amendments, like the Corwin Amendment, became irrelevant due to the major historical events such as the Civil War. Legislative alternatives. Others, like the Child Labor Amendment, were effectively replaced by federal laws and court decisions. And public opposition. Amendments like the ERA encountered organized opposition movements that prevented final ratification. Although these amendments have never become law, they offer a valuable insight into American history. They reveal the concerns of different eras, from fears of aristocracy in the early republic to struggles over slavery, labor rights, and gender equality. They also demonstrate the resilience of the constitutional system, which resists rapid or poorly supported changes. In some cases, unratified amendments continue to influence modern debates. The ERA, for example, remains a focal point for discussion about gender equality, while the issue of DC representation persists in contemporary politics. The story of unratified constitutional amendments is a story of conflict and compromise. While only a small fraction of proposed amendments ever become part of the Constitution, those that fail are no less important. They capture moments when Americans sought to redefine their government and address pressing issues of their time. Even in failure, these amendments contribute to the ongoing evolution of constitutional thought. Ultimately, the difficulty of amending the Constitution ensures that change comes slowly, but also that when it does, it reflects the enduring will of the nation. But what do you think? Which of these would you like to see ratified? What amendments would you like to see? Feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'll be posting here weekly. If there's anything you'd like me to cover next, let me know. Now for the dad joke of the week. What are politicians' preferred footwear? Flip-flops. Till next time, thanks for watching. I debated a little bit about doing this one due to the charged political climate these days. I don't really enjoy discussing politics for a lot of reasons, but I thought this was interesting to put in the context of the modern day and a lot of the frustrations we have with our system. Some of it is actually the system working how it was intended to work. It is supposed to be pretty slow and clunky. And so I thought it was interesting to kind of highlight some of these amendments that didn't go through and what they showed about America at different times in different places. So, yeah, kind of to answer my own question, um, I mean, to me, the modern ones of the DC representation and ERA, I would like to see those go through. I would like to see an amendment doing away with something like the money in politics issue, that sort of thing. Like maybe publicly funded elections. I don't know what that would end up looking like, but some sort of reform like that, or a an amendment that requires term limits for all the various stations in government and outlines what those would look like, including the Supreme Court, because I do think that somebody serving for life is not a wise decision, especially in an age where, people live well into their 90s now, especially with the kind of health care that can be afforded somebody at elite levels of government. And I do think it's interesting to look at the apportionment amendment, where, that would make it a little bit impractical to amend it as is. But if you think about it, that the concept is sound. Yes, representation is proportional, it's supposed to be proportional to population, but the idea that a growing country of 340 million people, give or take, is represented by 435 members of Congress and 100 senators, and then there's 9 Supreme Court justices and 1 president. You can kind of see where the way that the numbers are apportioned does sort of leave some room for uh, some gaps in that representation, perhaps. So maybe expanding some of these houses of government may not be a bad idea. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point. I just wanted to say that I've been losing my voice a little bit, so if I sound a little off, I thought I was okay to record, but kind of as I was going, I kind of felt it kind of coming and going a little bit. Um, Sorry about that. I've been having allergy struggles. And I had planned to do maybe a special for the end of the month, but I was going to do like weird science stories, but it just didn't work out. I don't really like the uh list type format I found when I was messing around with it. I kind of like these longer form where I can kind of ramble a little bit. So I kind of prefer that to that type of thing. But I do want to find some recurring series to cover on this channel. Something like one that's been in my head is the plants that made us, about staple crops from different parts of the world and how they influence history and what they look like today. So that's something that's in the works at some point, more like a theme or a playlist worthy video. And then I'll also, keep doing these kind of random week to week things. But anyway, I think I've rambled enough. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back next week with more interesting history and science.